Welcome back to Basin Motorsports. So today I'm going to show you the process to install a set of center hood vents from Race Louvers. Now the set I'm going to be installing is the RS Street Trim. These are specifically designed for the 79 to 82 Ford Mustang. Now these are the OEM steel hood, so they match the contour and shape of those. Now Race Louvers does offer three different sets or three different styles of the center hood vents. The RS Street Trim, which is meant for more of a street car with a little bit of autocross. They have an RS Track, which is autocross and more open track. And then they have the RS Extreme. Those are meant for purely open track race cars. Now as you get your kit, what you'll find in the box is going to be your pair of center vents. You'll have a pair of templates on a scale of 1 to 1 to be able to cut your hood by. It will come with the instructions to follow step by step to be able to put your hood vents in. It'll come with a set of 3/16 aluminum rivets that are color matched to the vents. The ones I'm installing are the semi-gloss powder coated black, so the aluminum rivets are also black, and a pair of Race Louvers stickers for your car. Now as we do this process, I will be following the instructions from Race Louvers that come in the kit. I do have a link in the description to Race Louvers for this set that I'm using today. You can also find what other sets they have available or a universal set. Any tools that I've also used here in this video, I will have links to in the description so you can see what is needed for this or what is going to be recommended. So let's get started. So the first step in installing your center hood vents is going to be determining where they need to go. Now everything here is going to be based off the back of the radiator, which is in the engine bay. So the first thing we're going to do is open our hood, prop it up either with our prop rod, or if we have gas struts, it'll stay up immediately. The next thing I want to do is I want to put a layer of tape down along the fender along the side of the hood. Now at that point you can lean down and you're going to mark along the tape where it matches up to the back of the radiator. So you can see I've got this line here which just by eyeball matches pretty much to the radiator, and I've just noted RAD, which means back of the radiator, for the instructions. I've also done the same on the other side, so you can just see same tape going down. This is just blue painter's tape, and you can see based on eyeball that's pretty close to the back of the radiator with the line and RAD indicating that's where it's going to be. So the next piece of this is I want to close the hood and make sure it's all the way latched, and then I want to use these reference marks to indicate on the hood surface itself with a piece of tape where this mark is going to be. Now one way you can know that you're on the line from line there is you can put a string from the radiator mark on the side tape all the way across to the other mark. Now you know exactly where the back of the radiator is as it sits directly under the hood. So all you need to do now is you can just run a mark down the string on the tape, and that indicates front to back where the radiator is. Now step 5, you're looking to measure from the base of the windshield, which is where my tape measure starts. You want to find where that measures down 24 inches. So you can see I've got 24 inches on my tape measure, and I've just created a black line there to indicate where that is in reference from the base of the glass. So once you know where that reference point is of 24 inches from the glass, you know where your radiator sits. This area between that mark down to here is what is known as the sweet spot. And what you're going to do now is you're going to cover the complete center of the hood where these grills are going to go in. You're going to cover this with painter's tape. Now the reason the painter's tape, one, you can mark on it easily. It gives you a good place to be able to cut to, and you don't have to worry about scratching any other paint or anything else. Now if you want to, you can cover everything on the whole hood. I mean, you can go crazy with tape, but really the only thing you need to worry about is really kind of the square, the center of the hood where the center vents go, side to side, and then from those marks back and forth. That's really only where you're going to do your work, so you can mark on there easily, not to worry. But if you want to make sure everything else is covered, you can always cover the whole hood in painter's tape. That way the surface anywhere else is going to be protected. All right, so next we're going to use a simple pair of scissors and we're going to cut our template. So the goal is to cut on the outside where it says top outside edge of vent. We're going to cut around this and then we're going to cut the center out so you can cut right on the lines there. The goal, or the end piece, is what you're going to look for, is to have a ring essentially that matches the size of the outside edge of your vents. Now you can always double check that these are the right templates to your vents. You can just lay this over once it's cut. You can see that the white template overlays the edge of the vent, so you know these are a great match. Template matches exactly to the vent. So once you cut to your template, you know your vents are going to drop right in. Okay, so once you have both of your templates cut out, now is the time to start finding out where they go on the car. So for maximum efficiency, it's noted in the instructions that the front edge of the louvers should be 2 inches at least from the back of the radiator. So what you can do is go from where you had your string previously on the radiator, measure 2 inches rearward beyond the car, put another mark. Then go to the opposite side of the car, do the same thing. From the back of the radiator, measure 2 inches rearward up the tape, and leave a mark. Now you can move your string to your 2-inch mark, and then you can put a black line directly on your tape. That way you know that is the 2-inch mark from your radiator. Now, knowing where your 24 inches was up here, and now you have your 2 inches down here, you know your sweet spot is in this area. What you can do from here is you can actually mark where the template should go. Now, I took the time with a tape measure to mark the center of the hood. Now, you can do it a couple different ways. I stretched the tape measure from that edge of the hood to that edge of the hood and marked it on the front and on the rear. And what I did there is just use a T-square, which is right there. Just ran that the length of the hood and then marked it there. So now I know where the center of my hood is. I know where my front edge is, which is the 2 inches. And now I know on each side, I just need to balance out where these templates go. Now it's really kind of up to you how you want these to lay out. You can easily butt the two edges together along the center line. You could put the front edge an inch off, something like this on each side, and just make them symmetrical about the center of the hood or anything else. It's just noted in there that you don't want any more difference from the perpendicular of the car, which is this. You don't want this angle any more than 15 degrees. So if you get really kind of funky and crazy, moving this template around, something crazy like that, you're really going to start limiting the effect of the aerodynamics of the hood vents. So the best is to try and keep the louvers themselves at a perpendicular to the car, about the center and here, so that way it can go straight up and out from the vents. Okay, so now I have the templates all aligned to the hood. So what you'll notice is that this front edge of the bottom of the outside of the template is on the 2-inch mark. This is the 2-inch line from the back of the radiator, which is right here. So I just decided that I would like a little strip right between the two vents. You can butt them together. These are spaced out from the center of the hood. They're spaced out to the outboard side a 1/2 inch. That leaves me a 1-inch strip of original hood between them. Now at the end, all I did was I marked from, I knew the edge here and the center, so the kind of the little centering cross. I just moved out and marked 1/2 inch on each side. I then went up to where they were at the top edge of the rear of the hood. I did the same thing, a little mark. I moved out a 1/2 inch, and then I knew where my templates were. Now in order to lay these down, I knew where the tip of the vent went, so I marked it there, and I'm just using a piece of painter's tape to hold that in place. I then went to the top, did the same thing, so it's right on the mark, the 1/2 inch space out. So I then basically wet this out, taped it there so it stayed in place, and then I came back here, same thing, wet it out, tape, wet it out, tape. That way I know where my 4 corners were going to be. Now this is not more than 15 degrees, so we're looking pretty good on how this is going to fit, and everything is about the center of the hood. Now one thing to note, that for maximum efficiency it's listed as these should start at the 2-inch mark or beyond, and so I did right exactly at 2 inches there where they started. And it's okay that if your templates do not go all the way back to the 24-inch mark that we measured before from the glass down, this is still the sweet spot. So having it more forward means it's closer to the radiator and it gets a lot more of that heat out for maximum cooling that way. Now once I've got my templates in place, all I've done is used a black marker just to basically trace on the line. What that does is give me a corner mark that I can take these templates off now and then basically do a connect the dots. So I can use my T-square, go from this dot to this dot, which gives me a straight edge, here to here, which gives me a straight edge, and do the same on the both sides. Once I have that box shaped in there, I know that that is my cut line, and anything in the center point is exactly what I'm cutting out of the hood. This is what comes out. So before you really mark everything and decide, before you mark this edge and decide this is exactly where you want, stand back, double check it to make sure it's exactly what you like, and also raise the hood up to make sure that there's nothing going to be in your way. There's no strut bars that are going to hit, cooling lines, anything extra. Double check that that's exactly where you want it before you mark it, because at that point you've made the decision that I'm going to cut out those chunks of metal, and this is how my hood is going to fit with the vents. So once you have all your lines in, you can then pull off your templates, just set them aside, and you can stand back and see exactly how your hood vents are going to be. Remember, the center piece right there is exactly what you're going to cut out. So you can just kind of take a few steps back, make sure it's exactly what you want, and then when you're ready to go, you can take the hood off the car, and we'll show you how to start cutting everything. All right, so now that you have your hood off your vehicle, you can now take it outside or to wherever you're going to cut the holes in the hood for the race louver heat extractors. Now, if your hood is like mine, you have a insulator on the back side of the hood. Now, maybe aftermarket or OEM, but you're gonna want to at least recess and cut off the pieces where the grills and the heat extractors are gonna go, or you may just choose to completely take it off altogether. In my case, I'm just gonna go ahead and take out the pieces where the heat extractor louvers are gonna go, and then that way I'll change from there as I need to. So once you have your hood insulator taken off, you can now flip the hood back over so the top side is right side up. You can now see all your marks. Now before you start cutting out your vent openings there, it's best to take a 3/8 drill bit and put a hole on each of the corners. Now remember, on the top side you're going to have a flange here that's 1 inch from this line. So if you go a little bit outside the lines here in the corner, it's going to be okay. So there are the center vents holes on the edges. So you can just kind of get to see, not exactly perfect on the cross section of the line there, but it's in a good spot. Now with this, I just use the center point on that drill bit to do it, and then I can just sneak up on it with a unit bit. So either way works, whatever's meant you comfortable. Just remember, let your tools do the work. Don't really push down on the hood. You don't want to add any dents or any creases or anything else. And just know that some of these along the edge or the back, you may strike the inner structure a little bit, so just be patient with it. You're going to cut it out anyway to get it out of the way of the grills, but if you touch it there and you actually drill a hole through it or drill into it, no big deal. You're going to recess them out of the way in a later step. Alright, so once you have your 4 corners done, it is now time to cut open the holes for the heat extractor race louver vents. So on the center, what you're going to do is actually cut to the outside of the line. So if you follow the instructions, it says that where your individual mark is, you want to add an extra 1/8 inch out from the line. So when I cut, I'm going to cut to the outside of this line. I'm going to stay close, but I'm not going to worry about if I vary away from the line a little bit. You'd rather have the opening just a slightly little bit larger than too small and have to recut later on. So you can just cut basically along the line all the way across and down and around. Now before you start cutting, double check there is nothing underneath. So I removed the blanket that I had laying under there, and I spaced out my sawhorses away from the cutting area so there's nothing below on the hood there to get in the way. So once you're ready, grab your saw, whether that is going to be a cutting wheel or cutoff wheel with a compressor like I'm using, a reciprocating saw, a sawzall, whatever you're going to use just be safe. Gloves, eyeglasses, you know, take the caution on PPE, and then start cutting those holes open. Here's the first vent. Now this is the passenger side center vent. Now I've cut it all the way around, and you can see just on the outside edge, you can see just beyond the Sharpie mark that I made. So the corners came out pretty nice. They're actually rounded almost to the edge where the cut is, so that is very nice. Now a little tip to keep the metal from kind of jockeying around and vibrating, what I'm using is some welding magnets. So these can just go across from the main hood to the piece. After you cut the corner out, you could just set those on there. The magnets actually will hold those in place, so this actually doesn't fall out now because it's being held with the magnets. If you don't have the magnets, you can always use something like some tape or anything else. All it is really is just keep the piece stable while I cut, and then when it is completely cut out like it is now, it doesn't fall out of there. Especially as you get to these last little bits, you'll notice that the metal will start to wobble around because it's barely held on. So you can just go ahead and cut that. Magnets hold it. Now I need to get the piece taken out, and we'll see how it looks. The piece taken out, you could see that the top layer is cut. This is the inner structure here. Now Race Louvers does suggest to help with the piece taken out, now you can see that all I have left is inner structure. Now Race Louvers does suggest that you cut out the inner structure an additional inch away from the sides and the rear. So the sides and the rear. So this inner structure, before I cut it straight down, I actually want to come in here to an inch. Now that inch itself would take it to the center line. And if I cut this one an inch over to the center line, well, basically I cut out that edge. So I will cut it here and a little bit on this edge back here just for airflow. And then on the front, it says to cut it upwards of 2 inches. Now on this one here, on this hood, there is no front structure to block airflow, so I won't have to cut anything other than to cut the side there. And then once I've cut this one, I'll cut that one additional and then worry about this edge here. All right, so once you get both of your center vents cut, you can now take the hood and flip it over to work on recessing the inner structure back past the edge, and you can also deburr the openings. Now just remember, these are fresh cut metal, so there's probably burrs in that. Make sure you're wearing gloves, protect yourself, that way you don't cut a finger on any of these new fresh cut surfaces. All right, so with the hood flipped over, now you can clearly see where your inside braces are going to be that you need to cut. So if you look at the front edge of them, approximately 2 inches back is going to be roughly right here. Now I've just used a plastic finesse stick to be able to pull this away from the outer, so that when I cut, there's no risk of cutting through this and through the outer here. Cutting through the outer means you have to repair it because you're beyond where your coverage is going to be here. So just space them apart as best you can. Gently cut this across, and then you can do that. Looking at the back side, roughly an inch back is somewhere roughly in here. And these are actually bonded together, so I'm going to do this one last. But this is going to be a tough one to cut because they are touching each other, so I'm going to try and space these apart. And then on the sides, if I was going to cut here, roughly about an inch over would be somewhere in this spot here. You can just cut if you're just doing the center vent. So that will give you your both sides an inch beyond, an inch beyond, an inch beyond, and then 2 inches forward. You can just cut out 4 pieces there and then take that out, and your center grills will then be open. All right, so there is the center vents without the inner bracing. Now you notice on the edges here, I've just gone through with a die grinder just to get those cleaned up all the way around the edges. That way there's no burrs there. And just remember, after you cut this, until you really deburr everything, there's going to be little slivers of metal of that. So just be careful. You can use a file, you can use sandpaper, or just die grinder just to clean up those edges. And then the last piece, if you find that your inner and outer or your top and bottom are bonded too much, you can just take a hacksaw blade, slide it in between, and then just basically cut the pieces back and forth. They're really not going to pull off very well. I mean, they've been there for 30-40 years by now. So you can just take a little blade, like a hacksaw blade, just basically cut through it, and then it will pull off, and then you can kind of scrape off anything extra. Now it's time to take this and we're going to flip it back over, try to fit our louvers in there and to see how everything fits. Louvers dropped right in place, no issues. The templates were fantastic. I cut a little wide like I said, and everything drops into place. Now these are aligned, if I reached my fingers down, straight down from this front edge here, and they're aligned to the front. Now they will have a little bit of play, but the more you push back, the more they're going to lift up. So if you go straight to the bottom here, where this drops straight in, you can see that they fit, and then you can balance them side to side. Now what I'm going to do is use my center line on the hood, which is my black mark, if you remember, which is down in here. I'm going to measure the front and rear, or the rear and front, however you want to be. Get these parallel to that line going this way, and then I'm going to take a marker and mark every open hole of mounting hole so that I know exactly where to drill with my 732 or 732nd drill bit. Alright, now with all of the holes verified to go through with all the rivets sit flat to the louvers themselves just by moving some holes, just elongating as you need to, just a smidge. Everything sits flat. Now you can take at this point, you can flip it over and double check that there are no burrs on the backside of all these drilled holes. You can also at this time recheck all of these openings here. Now you don't have to do it previously, you can do it now if you want to. If you want to do all of it on the backside, I just did it to split up just to make sure I didn't cut my fingers, but maybe I'm accident prone and that's okay. Once you're good there, peel off all the tape, and then you can clean the hood, make sure everything's good, and get ready to go put the hood back on the car. Okay, with everything cleaned up and the tape taken off, you can see that everything is good. The center vents fit very well, everything fits well there. No real scratches, everything looks good. Now I'm going to set the hood aside for a second, and then I will go ahead and bolt it on the car. The last piece will be putting louvers on the hood, but the hood is going to be on the car at that point. Now one final note here before you put the hood on the car, if you're worried about corrosion, you can take a spray can of just something like black, spray a little bit on the tip, put the tip right to the edge of the can, and then you can rub it on the cutout openings here and on the back side of the drilled holes. That way you'll have a painted surface there that won't have to worry about corrosion. If you're worried in about it, otherwise you can just go ahead and install it that way if you're not worried about covering the exposed metal. So now with the hood installed back on the car, you can see where there's going to be any contact points potentially. You can take your louvers and set them down inside each of the cavities and just ensure that they are not going to touch anything down below. They're not going to hit a belt, any of your radiator, reservoirs, or anything else, mass air meter, etc. Alright, so there's your finished product with the grills completely on the hood now. Now there's a couple different options. Race Louvers does give you a set of rivets for each of the sets. Whether it's a center or a side, they'll give you 3/16 aluminum rivets that are black powder coated to match. Now because my car is vinyl wrapped, it is going to use fasteners. Now these are a 10-24 button head screw. These are black powder coat also, and they are a 1/2 inch long. Now they've got a threaded nylon nut, lock nut on the back, but they will bolt down. Now everything else looks really good here. You can see they're nicely form-fitting down to the sheet metal all the way across, and they will do fantastically to allow heat to escape, plus add extra downforce because there's no pressure in the hood, and everything is going to be good. Now, like I said previously, the templates, before you cut this, if you decide you want to try them on your car to see what it's going to look like or how they're going to fit, you can download those as a PDF off of racelouvers.com. You can look at each individual car itself and the options available. The templates are available for download. Remember to print them in a 1x1 scale. That way they will be the correct size for your car. Now everything I've used here between the kit itself and all the tools I've used along the way, I will put down in the description. You guys can go down there and check out, go to racelouvers.com, directly to the louvers here that I've got, which are the RS Street Trim. You can look at all of those for Ford Mustangs or any other vehicle they have available on their website. If they don't have one, if it's not something in a universal size, contact them directly, tell them what you're looking for, and they could probably design up exactly what you need to fit the exact car you're working on. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching here on Basin Motorsports. We'll see you next time. Happy driving.